Now entering JustProfessor. Your memory is lying to you right now. You think you've always believed what you currently believe, but you haven't. Your brain is constantly rewriting your past to make it match your present, and you have no idea it's happening. Think about something you believe strongly right now, maybe a political view, an opinion about someone, a position on some issue. Now try to remember what you thought about that same thing 5 years ago. Most people will say they've always felt roughly the same way. But here's the truth. You probably didn't. You've changed way more than you remember changing. Your brain has this weird habit of reaching back into your memories and editing them to make your past self look more like your current self. This is consistency bias, and it's making you misremember your own history. Consistency bias is when you remember your past attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors as being more similar to your current ones than they actually were. Your brain smooths out the changes. It minimizes how much you've shifted. It makes your past self seem more consistent with your present self than the reality. You think, "I've always known this," or "I've always felt this way," when actually, past you would be surprised by what present you believes. This happens because your brain wants coherence. It wants your identity to feel stable and consistent. Having a past self who thought completely differently feels uncomfortable and confusing. So your memory automatically adjusts. It doesn't feel like you're lying or making things up. The false memory feels completely real. You genuinely remember always thinking this way, even though you didn't. The problem is, this makes you blind to how much you've changed. It makes you overconfident in your current beliefs because you think you've always held them. It makes you judgmental of others who disagree because you can't remember ever thinking differently. And it prevents you from learning from your past because you don't even remember your past accurately. Let me show you where consistency bias shows up. Political opinions are huge for this. People's political views actually shift quite a bit over time, but they rarely remember shifting. Researchers have done studies where they ask people about their political positions, wait a few years, then ask those same people what they believed years earlier. People consistently misremember their past views as being closer to their current views than they actually were. If someone became more liberal, they remember being more liberal in the past than they were. If they became more conservative, they remember being more conservative before. This creates a false sense that their current political views are deeply held lifelong principles when actually they're relatively recent positions. It makes people think they've always known things they only started believing recently. And it makes them less understanding of people with different views because they can't remember having different views themselves. Relationships show this constantly. When a relationship is going well, people remember it as always having been good. They minimize past conflicts and problems. Their memory edits out the rough patches. Then, if the relationship ends badly, they go back and remember it as always having problems. They rewrite the good times as actually being bad underneath. The relationship hasn't changed. It's over. It is what it was. But their memory of it changes based on how they feel now. Or think about how you remember exes. When you first break up, you might remember them as terrible. Your brain rewrites all the memories to match your current negative feelings. Years later, when you've moved on and don't care anymore, you might remember them more positively. The memories shift to match your current emotional state rather than reflecting the actual past accurately. Career decisions get this treatment too. When someone is happy in their current job, they remember being unhappy in their previous job. They think, "I always knew that job wasn't right for me." But at the time, they might have been perfectly content. The memory gets rewritten to make their career path look like a logical progression where each step was obviously right or wrong, when actually it was probably much more uncertain and complicated than the edited memory suggests. Parenting shows consistency bias in interesting ways. Parents remember their parenting style as being more consistent than it was. They remember being stricter or more relaxed than they actually were, depending on their current parenting philosophy. And they often can't accurately remember how their views on parenting have changed because consistency bias makes their past views seem more similar to current views. Investment decisions get destroyed by this. Someone makes an investment and it goes well. They remember always being confident it would work. I knew it was a good buy. But their emails and notes from the time show they were actually quite uncertain. Or an investment goes badly and they remember having doubts all along, when actually they were enthusiastic at the time. Consistency bias rewrites their memories to make them look smarter in retrospect than they were in the moment. This combines with hindsight bias in dangerous ways. Hindsight bias makes outcomes seem predictable after they happen. Consistency bias makes you remember predicting those outcomes all along. Together, they create this false narrative where you were right about everything and your beliefs have been consistent and correct over time. Learning and growth get hidden by consistency bias. When you learn something new and change your mind, consistency bias makes you forget you used to think differently. Students who improve their understanding of a topic often can't remember what they used to think was true. This makes it harder to empathize with other people who are where you used to be because you don't even remember being there. Health behaviors show this too. People who successfully change their diet or exercise habits often remember being more health-conscious in the past than they were. They minimize how dramatic the change was. And people who fail to maintain healthy habits sometimes remember being less committed in the past than they were, making themselves feel better about giving up. So, how do you fight consistency bias? How do you accurately remember how much you've changed? First, write things down. The single best defense against consistency bias is having an actual record of what you thought in the past. Keep a journal. Save your old social media posts. Record your predictions and beliefs. When you can go back and read what you actually wrote, you can't rewrite it as easily. You'll be shocked at how different past you was from how you remember past you being. Second, actively try to remember times you changed your mind. Consistency bias makes you forget changes. Fight this by deliberately reflecting on times your views shifted. What did you used to believe that you don't believe now? What changed your mind? This exercise helps you see that you're not as consistent as you feel. Third, be humble about your current beliefs. If you've changed your mind many times in the past, you'll probably change it again in the future. Consistency bias makes you think your current views are the end point, the final truth you've arrived at. But you probably thought that about previous views too. Hold your current beliefs a bit more loosely, knowing you might think differently later. Fourth, talk to people who knew you in the past. Friends and family remember a different version of you than you remember. They can help you see how you've changed. This is uncomfortable because it challenges your sense of stable identity, but it's valuable for accurate self-knowledge. Fifth, look at your behavior, not just your claimed beliefs. Consistency bias affects how you remember your attitudes, but your actual behavior is harder to misremember. If you say you've always cared about something, check if your past behavior reflects that. Often you'll find your actions tell a different story than your edited memories. Sixth, be skeptical when you think, "I've always known this," or "I never believed that." These are red flags for consistency bias. Unless you have concrete evidence from the past, these feelings of lifelong consistency are probably false. You've changed more than you remember. Consistency bias is making you misremember who you were. It's creating a false narrative of stability and coherence in your beliefs and attitudes. It's making you think you've always been roughly the person you are now, when actually you've changed dramatically. And it's doing all this without you noticing because the false memories feel completely real. This bias isn't about you being dishonest. You're not consciously lying about your past. Your brain is automatically editing your memories to create a more consistent story. It happens below your awareness, and the edited version becomes what you genuinely remember. The problem is this makes you overconfident in your current views and judgmental of different views. If you think you've always believed what you currently believe, those beliefs feel like fundamental truths rather than current positions that might change, And if you can't remember ever thinking differently, you can't understand why anyone else would think differently. Understanding consistency bias helps you see yourself more accurately. You've changed a lot. Your views have shifted. Your attitudes have evolved. You're not the same person you were 5 or 10 years ago. And you probably won't be the same person 5 or 10 years from now. That's normal and okay. The problem is when you forget this happened and think you've been consistent all along. The next time you feel certain you've always believed something, question that feeling. Your brain might be rewriting history to make you look more consistent than you are. Check your actual past if you can. Ask people who knew you then. Be open to discovering that past you was different than you remember. Your memory is not a recording. It's a story your brain tells you, and that story changes based on who you are now. Knowing this doesn't give you perfect memory, but it does make you more skeptical of your own certainty about your past. Subscribe to discover more ways your memory is distorting your understanding of yourself.